Hello everyone, welcome back to Jiffy Learning. In this video, we'll be discussing about Russian Revolution. So let's begin the video. By discussing the age of social change. French Revolution opened up the possibility of creating a dramatic change in the way in which society was structured. In many parts of the world, including Europe and Asia, new ideas about individual rights developed. सो बेसिकली हुआ क्या, जैसे ही फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन हुआ तो उसके आइडिया से बहुत सारे अक्रॉस द ग्लोब बहुत सारे नेशन इंस्पायर होने लगे और उनको लगा कि अगर उनके सोसाइटी के स्ट्रक्चर को चेंज करने के लिए वो आवाज उठा सकते हैं और उसमें सक्सेसफुल हो सकते हैं तो हम क्यों नहीं। लाइक वाइज इंडिया में राजा राम मोहन रॉय हु वाज द फाउंडर ऑफ ब्रह्म समाज, देरोजियो जो कि हिंदू कॉलेज में एज अ लेक्चरर काम करते थे, उन्होंने भी फ्रेंच रिवॉल्यूशंस के पॉजिटिव पॉइंट्स को इंडिया में प्रोपोगेट करने का और स्प्रेड करने का जिम्मा उठाया। नाउ टॉकिंग अबाउट कि अब होता है ना, कुछ चेंजेस होते हैं जो ऑलमोस्ट सबको अच्छे लगते हैं, बट अगेन ऐसे कुछ लोग होते हैं जो उन चेंजेस को अडॉप्ट करने के लिए तैयार नहीं होते हैं। सो लाइक वाइज the society was divided, the European society was divided into certain type of people, conservative, liberals and radicals, जिनके थॉट से वैरी करते थे एक दूसरे से। So now let's see in the next slide who actually they were. अब क्योंकि बात हो रही है डिवीजन ऑफ सोसाइटी की, सो लेट्स स्टडी हाउ एक्चुअली द सोसाइटी वाज डिवाइडेड हियर. So it was basically divided into liberals, radicals, and conservatives. One of the groups which looked to change the society were the liberals. Liberals wanted a nation which tolerated all the religions, opposed the uncontrolled power of the dynastic rulers, safeguard the rights of individuals against government, elected parliamentary government, and they were subject to laws interpreted by a well-trained judiciary that was independent of rulers and officials. So basically वो ऐसे रूल को एक्सेप्ट कर सकते थे जो कि एक प्रॉपर वेल ट्रेन्ड जुडिशरी ने दिए हो, ऐसा डिसीजन जो जुडिशरी ने दिया हो जिसपे गवर्नमेंट का या रूलर्स का कोई भी इन्फ्लुएंस ना रहे। सो बेसिकली ये बड़े ही खुले विचारधारा वाले लोग थे, दैट्स व्हाई दे वर नोन एज लिबरल्स। उनको हर चेंजेस एक्सेप्टेबल थे and the society was divided in this way: liberals, radicals and conservatives. अब ये कंजर्वेटिव्स क्या थे? तो ये जो कंजर्वेटिव्स थे वो ना लिबरल के थॉट्स को एक्सेप्ट कर रहे थे और ना ही रेडिकल्स को। उनको अपना बीच का एक रास्ता लग रहा था। वो देवर मोर ऑफ वॉकिंग ऑन अ मिडिल पाथ कह सकते हैं। So basically, they were opposed to radicals and liberals. And after the French Revolution, however, even the conservatives had opened up their mind और उनको लगा कि नहीं, चलो भाई थोड़े बहुत changes तो हम accept कर सकते हैं. Now, who were these radicals? So radicals wanted a nation in which government was based on the majority of the country's population. They opposed the privileges of the great land owners and the factory owners. So basically, उनको लगा कि concentration of wealth सिर्फ इनके हाथ में नहीं होना चाहिए, वेल्थ शुड बी इक्वली डिवाइडेड और सबको अपॉर्चुनिटीज मिलनी चाहिए। तो ऐसे वाले जो लोग थे दे केम अंडर द कैटेगरी ऑफ रेडिकल्स। लेट्स टॉक अबाउट द एरा ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल चेंजेस. So industrial revolution led to changes in social and economic life. New cities came up and new industrialized regions developed. So basically होता क्या है, छोटी छोटी cities develop होने लगी क्योंकि industrial changes आ रहे थे, नई नई industry setup हो रही थी, जिसकी वजह से men, women and children उनको work opportunities मिल रही थी. They were getting the employment. वो नौकरी ढूंढते हुए factories तक पहुंच रहे थे. But actually they were not able to comply with the working hours and the wages. क्योंकि अब जो उनको वेजेस दी जा रही थी विच वाज एक्चुअली नॉट सेटिस्फैक्टरी। और अगेन काम तो बहुत था पर लोग करने के लिए नहीं तैयार हो रहे थे बिकॉज द वर्किंग कंडीशंस वर नॉट फेवरेबल। अब जिसकी वजह से क्या हुआ, देयर वाज अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट और जो गुड्स थे, जो डिमांड थी वो भी नहीं फुलफिल हो पाई। अब आगे जो युद्ध था, जो घमासान था, वो होने वाला था रोटी कपड़ा मकान और पैसों के लिए। Now let's discuss about the coming of socialism to Europe. So basically socialism क्या है? It's a, we can say it's a body of ideas जो ये कहता है, as per this we all are born as a human being और हम सबको equally treat किया जाना चाहिए। किसी को भी extra privileges नहीं मिलने चाहिए just because of his or her financial status. अब इसमें बहुत सारे नाम आते हैं। For example, Robert Owen, who sought to build a cooperative community called New Harmony. एंड एक मेन नाम था, वो था कार्ल मार्क्स एंड फ्रेडरिक इंगल्स. ही एडेड अबाउट सर्टेन आइडियाज. अब अगर कार्ल मार्क्स का नाम आया है, सो लेट्स स्टडी अबाउट कार्ल मार्क्स. So according to Marx, industrial society was a capitalist one who owned the capitalist investment in the factories, and the profit of the capitalist was produced by the worker. So basically इन्होंने बोला कि जो इंडस्ट्रियल सोसाइटी है वो ओन करते हैं कौन, कैपिटलिस्ट, क्योंकि उनका इन्वेस्टमेंट ज्यादा है फैक्ट्रीज में. सो बेसिकली दे आर द ओनर्स ऑफ द प्रॉफिट, जो अर्न करके कौन दे रहा है, वर्कर. तो बेसिकली वो इन सब चीजों के अगेंस्ट है. उन्होंने बोला कि हम इक्वली, हम सब ह्यूमन बींग्स है तो हमें इक्वल राइट्स मिलने चाहिए. सो Marx believed that a communist society was the natural society of the future. उनको future नजर आ रहा था, and he said that communist society ही हमारा future होना चाहिए. Now, with the coming of socialism, actually socialism को बहुत सारा support भी मिल रहा था. Socialist ideas spread through Europe, and they formed an international body, namely it was called as Second International. And moreover, the labor parties and socialist parties were formed by socialists and trade unions by 1905. And now, what happened? What was actually the state of, we can say, the condition of Russian Empire, or how big it was, कितना बड़ा empire था, कौन rule करता था? So in 1914, Russia was ruled by Tsar Nicholas II and its empire. The Russian Empire included current-day Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and the parts of Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the majority of the population was Christian. Now, talking about the Russian Revolution, how or the outbreak of the revolution. So, in October 1917, the socialists they took over the government in Russia. The fall of monarchy in February 1917, and the events of October are termed as Russian Revolution. That's what we are going to study here. Now, in this slide, we will be discussing about the economy and the society. So, at the beginning of the 20th century, the Russian population was dominated by agriculturalists. St. Petersburg and Moscow were the prominent industrial areas. Moreover, in 1980s, more factories were set up and foreign investment in industries increased. क्योंकि इंडस्ट्रियल रिवॉल्यूशन वाला फेज चल रहा था तो बेसिकली इन्वेस्टमेंट आता ही जा रहा था, जिसकी वजह से फैक्ट्री सेटअप हो रही थी. लार्ज फैक्ट्रीज वर सुपरवाइज्ड बाय द गवर्नमेंट टू इंश्योर मिनिमम वेजेस एंड लिमिटेड वर्क आवर्स. Workers were also divided into social groups. Despite division, वर्कर्स यूनाइटेड. अब कितना भी डिवीजन हो जाए, वो सोशल ग्रुप्स और स्किल के हिसाब से डिवाइडेड थे, पर जहां भी आवाज उठाने की बात आती थी, दे वर यूनाइटेड. अपनी वर्किंग कंडीशंस के लिए, वेजेस के लिए, तो वो सब एकजुट हो जाते थे ट्रेड यूनियन के नाम पे. Peasants cultivated most of the land, but the nobility, the crown, and the Orthodox Church owned large properties. Nobles got the power and position through their services to Tsar. In Russia, peasants wanted the land of the nobles. So basically, ये जो revolution हुआ था, ये इसी के लिए था कि हम उनके land पे काम कर रहे हैं, तो हमें वो status क्यों नहीं मिल रहा है? And that's how it continued further. Let's discuss about the coming of socialism in Russia. So political parties in Russia were legal before 1914. In 1898, socialists founded the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, which respected Marx's ideas. Some Russian socialists felt that the Russian peasants' customs of dividing land periodically made them the natural socialist. Throughout the 19th century, socialists were active in the countryside and formed the Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1900. And the party struggled for peasants' rights. Basically, peasants के rights के लिए लड़ने के लिए एक पार्टी बन चुकी थी. And the party was divided over the strategy of the organization. Again, होता है ना, कोई भी पार्टी बनती है तो उसमें division of thoughts, division of ideas तो आने ही होते हैं. So, according to Vladimir Lenin, in a repressive society like Tsarist Russia, the party should be disciplined and should control the number and quality of members. ये नहीं कि आओ 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 पार्टी में जुड़ जाओ जुड़ जाओ जुड़ जाओ. That shouldn't be the policy. नंबर पे कंट्रोल करना और क्वालिटी पे. अगर कोई मेंबर आपकी पार्टी से जुड़ रहा है, then at least he should possess a certain quality of being a leader or being the member of certain party. So that's how they are going to embrace socialism. Talking about the turbulent time or the 1905 revolution. So, a bad time started from the year 1904 as the prices of essential goods started rising, and there was a real wage decline by, and the real wage it declined by 20%. वर्कर्स स्ट्राइक पे चले गए थे क्योंकि उनको अपनी डिमांड्स पूरी करवानी थी. 8 घंटे काम, इंक्रीज इन वेजेस, फलाना धमाका, बहुत सारी उनकी डिमांड्स थी. द प्रोसेस, अब उन्होंने स्ट्राइक निकाली जिसपे अटैक किया गया. एंड द टाइम, जिस दिन अटैक किया गया था, द डे इज नोन एज ब्लडी संडे. Or during the 1905 revolution, Tsar allowed the creation of an elected consultative parliament or Duma, उसको नाम दिया गया Duma का. So after 1905, most committees and unions worked unofficially since they were declared illegal. Now let's discuss about the First World War and the Russian Empire. So in 1914, war broke out between two European alliances, Germany, Austria and Turkey, and France, Britain and Russia. अब इसमें meanwhile होता क्या है? The war became popular and as it continued, Tsar refused to consult the main parties in the Duma and therefore उसको ना कोई support मिला. The First World War was different on the Eastern Front and on the Western Front. Between 1914 and 1916, the Russian army lost badly in Germany and Austria. Now, Russian army destroyed crops and buildings to prevent the enemy from being able to live off the land. The country was cut off from other supplies. So basically, इन्होंने सारे source supplies सब cut कर दिए. And now what happened? For the people in the city, bread and flour became a scarce resource. And by the winter of 1960, रैली राइट्स ये सारी चीजें बहुत कॉमन हो गई थी. किसके लिए? रोटी, कपड़ा और मकान के लिए. Now let's discuss about the February Revolution in Petrograd. So what actually is February Revolution? So Petrograd city is divided among its people. On the right bank of the river Neva, workers' quarters and factories were located, and on the left bank located fashionable areas such as the Winter Palace and the official buildings. On the right bank, a factory was shut down on February 22. Women also led the way to strike. Basically, women ने भी participate किया था. And the government imposed a curfew as the fashionable quarters and the official buildings were surrounded by workers. Duma was suspended on 25th of February. The streets thronged with demonstrators raising slogans about bread, wages, better hours and democracy. रोटी, कपड़ा और मकान के लिए घमासान शुरू हो चुकी थी. Soldiers and striking workers gathered to form a Soviet or a council in the same building where the Duma met, and it is termed the Petrograd Soviet. The Soviet leaders and the Duma leaders formed a provisional government to run the country. Russia's future would be decided by a constituent assembly elected on the basis of universal adult suffrage. Now, talking about after February, so, under the provisional government, army officials, landowners, and industrialists were influential. Liberals and socialists worked towards an elected government. In April 1917, the Bolshevik leader Vladimir Lenin returned to Russia from his exile, अब वो वापस आ गए, and he demanded three things which are known as April 3 thesis. So, he wanted war to end, land to be transferred to the peasants, and the bank to be nationalized. Workers' movement spread throughout the summer and factory committees were formed and trade unions grew in number. When the provisional government saw its power reduced and Bolshevik influence grew, they decided to take stern measures against the spreading discontent. Now, in the countryside, peasants and their socialist revolutionaries leader pressed for a redistribution of land. उन्होंने बोला कि land का redistribution होना चाहिए. So basically ये उसके outcomes हो रहे थे. Encouraged by the socialist revolutionaries, peasants seized the land between July and October 1917. Now, what happened actually during the revolution of October 1917? So, the conflict between the provisional government and the Bolshevik it grew, and on October 16, 1917, Lenin he persuaded the Petrograd Soviet and the Bolshevik Party to agree to a socialist seizure of power. Now, meanwhile, a revolutionary committee was appointed by the Soviet Union under Lenin Trotsky, and the military revolutionary committee it ordered its supporters to seize government officers and arrest the ministers. And at a meeting of all Russian Congress of Soviets in Petrograd, the majority approved the Bolshevik action. Basically, उनको हरी झंडी मिल गई थी. Now, talking about what changed after October. So, industries and banks were nationalized in November 1917, which meant that the government took over ownership and management. Land was declared as social property, and peasants were allowed to seize the land of the nobility. The Bolshevik Party was renamed the Russian Communist Party. Elections were conducted in November 1917 to the Constituent Assembly, but they failed in the majority. In January 1918, the assembly rejected Bolshevik measures and Lenin dismissed the assembly. Despite oppositions, in March 1918, the Bolsheviks made peace with Germany at Brest-Litovsk. The Bolshevik participated In the elections to the All Russian Congress of Soviets, which became the parliament of the country, Russia became a one party state. After October 1917, this led to experiments in the arts and architecture, but many became disillusioned because of the censorship the party encouraged. Now, let's talk about what exactly is civil war. So, taking the scenario of civil war, the Russian army it broke up, and their leaders they moved to South Russia and organized themselves into a troops to fight against Bolsheviks, and they were known as the Reds. And during 1918 to 1919, the Russian Empire was controlled by Greens, जिनको socialist revolutionaries भी बोला गया, and the Whites, who were considered pro-Tsarist. By January 1920, the Bolsheviks controlled most of the former Russian Empire, and in the name of defending socialism, socialism को बचाने के नाम पर उन्होंने क्या किया? They actually the Bolshevik colonists they brutally massacred local nationalists जो local छोटे मोटे उभरते हुए leaders थे nationalists थे उनको मारना शुरू कर दिया. Most non-Russian nationalities were given political autonomy in the Soviet Union, and the state the Bolshevik created from the Russian Empire in December 1922. Now, talking about the making of a socialist society, so the first thing which was done was during the Civil War, the industries, banks, they were kept nationalized. Peasants were permitted to cultivate on the land. A centralized planning process was introduced. जो 5 year plans है वो introduce किए गए थे, and हमारे इंडिया ने भी ये 5 years plan adopt किए थे. And during the first two plans, the government fixed all the prices to promote industrial growth. But again, centralized planning led to economic growth. ग्रोथ तो हुई थोड़ी बहुत, बट इतना कंस्ट्रक्शन हुआ जिसकी वजह से वर्किंग कंडीशंस बहुत पुअर हो गई. स्कूलिंग सिस्टम डेवलप किया गया. जो वर्किंग विमेंस थी उनके लिए क्रेश डेवलप किए गए. मॉडर्न लिविंग क्वार्टर्स डेवलप किए गए. सो बेसिकली सोशलिस्ट इकोनॉमी के लिए बहुत सारी प्लानिंग्स की गई थी. Talking about Stalinism and collectivization, so basically the period of the early planned economy led to the disaster of the collectivization of agriculture. By 1927 to 28, Soviet Union they faced a acute problem of grain supplies. 1928, party members toured the grain producing areas, and actually एक नाम दिया गया था कुलक्स का. ये जो well to do peasants थे उनको ये नाम दिया गया. And in 1970, the land was given over to the peasants. From 1929, the party forced all the peasants to cultivate in collective forms, जिनको kolkhos बोला गया. And between 1929 to 1931, the number of cattle fell by one third. So the government of Stalin allowed some independent cultivations, but again उनको बड़ा ही unsympathetically treat किया गया. So in spite of collectivization, production did not increase immediately, and due to bad harvest of 1930 and 1931 to 1933, over 4 million people died. And throughout the country, acquisitions were made, and by 1939, over 2 million were in prison or labor camps. Now, what was the impact of the Russian Revolution? Or let's study the global influence of the Russian Revolution. So, in many countries, communist parties were formed. For example, the Communist Party of Great Britain. Russians, non-Russians from outside the USSR participated in the Conference of the People in the East in 1920, and the Bolshevik they founded Comintern's, an international union of pro-Bolshevik socialist parties. Before the outbreak of the Second World War, the USSR had given a socialism a global face and world stature. The USSR became a great power, and its industries and agriculture developed, and the poor were being fed. By the end of the 20th century, the international reputation of the USSR as a socialist country had declined. So भैया इतना बड़ा रेवोल्यूशन हुआ और अंत में पूरी की पूरी मिट्टी पलीद हो गई. इसी के साथ आज का वीडियो समाप्त करती हूँ. अगर अच्छा लगा है तो प्लीज लाइक शेयर करिएगा, और अगर अभी तक आपने मेरे चैनल को सब्सक्राइब नहीं किया है तो प्लीज करिएगा. एंड यस, हिट द बेल आइकन सो दैट यू डोंट मिस एनी ऑफ द रीसेंट अपडेट्स. मिलते हैं अगले वीडियो में. बाय बाय.